I have heard you say that life itself is so fulfilling, so overflowing, so blissful. Then what is it that makes a person miserable?
Life is overflowing, life is blissful, but man has lost contact with life. He has become too self-conscious. That self-consciousness functions as a barrier. And one remains alive yet not truly alive. Self-consciousness is the disease. The birds are happy, the trees are happy. The clouds and the rivers are happy, but they are not self-conscious. They are simply happy. They don't know that they are happy. Buddha is happy, Krishna is happy, Christ is happy, but they are pure consciousness. They are happy, but they don't know that they are. There is a similarity between unconscious nature and supraconscious beings. Unconscious nature has no self, and the supraconscious being also have no self. Man is just in between. He is no longer an animal, no longer a tree, no longer a rock. And yet not a Buddha. Hanging in between is the misery. Just the other day a new seeker wrote me a letter, saying, "Osho, I don't want to become a sannyasin. I don't want to become superhuman like Buddha or Christ. I simply want to become just human. Help me to become just human." Now, this is too ambitious, and it is impossible. Just to be human is impossible. Try to understand it. Because that means you are saying, let me just remain the process, in the middle. Man is not a state, man is only a process. For example, if a child says, I don't want to become a youth. I don't want to become old. Let me just remain a child. Is it possible? The child is already becoming a youth, he is on the way. Childhood is not a state, you cannot remain in it. You cannot stick to it, it is a process. Childhood is already going, youth is already coming. And so is youth going. However hard you try to remain young, your efforts are doomed to fail because youth is already turning into old age. Just to be human, you ask the impossible. You are too ambitious. You can become a Buddha, that is simpler. You can become a god, that is simpler. But to say that you would like to just remain human is impossible. Because humanity is just a passage, a voyage, a journey, a pilgrimage. It is a process, not a state. You cannot remain human. If you try too hard to remain human, you will become inhuman. You will start falling. If you don't go ahead, you will start slipping backward. But you will have to go somewhere. You cannot remain static. To be human simply means to be on the way of being a god, and nothing else. God is the goal. To be human is the journey, the way. The way can never be permanent, it cannot become eternal. Otherwise it will be very tiring. The goal will never arrive then. And you will be just on the journey, on the journey, on the journey. To hope is to be human. But to hope means to hope to go beyond. To hope means to desire beyond. To hope means to hope to surpass, to transcend. This is really the state of a human being that he is. Always surpassing, going, going, going. Somewhere else is the goal. The person who has asked it must be a beautiful person, in fact. Ready for sannyas, but he does not understand what he is saying. Man is miserable because man has to be miserable person, in fact. Ready for sannyas, but he does not understand what he is saying. Man is miserable because man has to be miserable. It is nothing of your fault, it is nothing like that, you are in some errors. To be human is to be miserable, because to me human is to be in the middle. Neither here nor there, but hanging in limbo. Anguish arises because of the tension. One home is lost, the home where birds are still singing, animals still moving, trees still flowering, the Garden of Eden. That one home is lost. Adam has been turned out. Adam has become human. When Adam was in the Garden of Eden, he was an animal, he was not an Adam, he was not a man. God turned him out of the garden. That very expulsion became humanity. Man is expelled from one home, so that he can search for another home bigger, higher, deeper, greater. One home is lost. There is a nostalgia, man wants to become animal. It is very difficult to forget that Garden of Eden. It was so beautiful. And there are moments we become animal, like in deep anger, in violence, in war. That's the enjoyment of being angry. Why do you feel so happy in being angry? Why do you feel such a rush of energy in destroying something? Why in wartime do people look more radiant, more healthy, more sharp, more intelligent? As if life is no longer a boredom. What happens? Man falls back. Even for a few days, a few months, man again is an animal. Then he knows no law, then he knows no humanity, then he knows no God. Then he simply drops his self-consciousness, becomes unconscious, and murders, kills, rapes. Everything is allowed in war. That's why man needs war continuously. After each 10 years a big war is needed. And small wars have to be continued all the time. Otherwise it will be difficult for man to live. Man becomes a drunkard, becomes a drug addict. Through drugs, man tries to reclaim the lost home, the lost paradise. When you are under the influence of LSD, you are back in the Garden of Eden. From the back door. LSD is the back door of the Garden of Eden. Again life seems psychedelic, colorful. Again trees look luminous. As they must have looked to Adam and Eve. As they must be right now for birds and tigers and monkeys. The green has a luminosity to it. Everything looks so beautiful. You are no longer human, you have fallen back. You have forced your being to fall back. Hence, tremendous appeal exists in alcoholic beverages and drugs. Since the very beginning of human history, man has been after drugs. In the Vedas they called it soma, now they call it LSD. But it is not a different thing. Sometimes it was ganja, bang. Now it is marijuana and other things. But it is the same old game. Chemically it is possible to fall back, but you cannot really go back. There is no going back. Time does not allow that. One just has to go forward. You cannot move backward in time. The reverse gear does not exist. When Ford made his first car, there was no reverse gear. Only later on they realized that it was very difficult to come back home. You had to take long turns, travel unnecessary miles, then you could come back. Then the reverse gear was added as a later thought. But in time, there is no reverse gear. You cannot go back. Man has dreamed about it, fantasized about it. There are science fiction stories in which man can go back into time. H.G. Wells had an idea of a time machine, where you sit in the machine. And you put it in the reverse gear and you start moving. But no time machine exists. It exists only in poets' minds, in fantasies. To go back is not possible. There is only one possibility to go ahead. Man has to remain in anguish. There are only two ways. Either make it possible to go back, or to go beyond humanity. Humanity is a bridge. You cannot make a house on it. It has to be passed. It is not to be lived upon.